related to that. So she has spent over 20 years helping students and family achieve their dreams of pursuing higher education with financial self-awareness and confidence. Having an academic background in economics, Amy helps students recognize the opportunity costs in each decision, leading to balanced, informed financial strategies. Amy has worked on both the for-profit and nonprofit side of the student loan business for most of her professional life, and she understands the personal professional balance many people desire. Her passion to assist students and families in successful repayment of the student loans while enjoying a successful personal and professional lifestyle. So Amy, take it away.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. And I really encourage you to use that chat panel because that's going to be our primary means of communicating. So I'm going to warm you guys up. I like to know who my audience is. If you can please put in the chat panel and tell me if you are a freshman, sophomore, junior, or senior. That would be helpful to get an idea. And then maybe after that, if you can also, senior, great. And put like senior, comma, applying to school when? Fall of 2021, fall of 2022, just so I get an idea. Freshman, but technically considered a junior. Okay, that's interesting. All right, Jen, so what do you think we have as you're taking a look at the chat panel there for me?
So, wow, it looks like we have mostly seniors applying for this cycle.
Great.
We have a post back that is fall 2021. We have a junior and a couple juniors, and then we have somebody who's applying for fall 2023 after grad school. So it looks like the majority are seniors applying this cycle, but we have a little of everything thrown in there.
Excellent. I love that. So today's topic is really paying for law school. And this is near and dear to my heart because about 8 years ago, my daughter went to law school. And I was struggling with, oh my gosh, how are we going to pay for this? I just finished her undergrad. What are we going to do for law school? And I had wished that I had a workshop just like this. So we put into this workshop kind of all these questions and all the unknowns so that you're better prepared for just paying for law school, right? That's what really at the end of the day, what's really important. And for some of you, you might even be doing a back of the pencil, your return on your investment. Is what you will be paying for law school and applying for law school, is it worth it for you? And so we're going to talk about some of the resources that AccessLex has available to you that you can weigh all of that out. So what I first want to just kind of tell you about this is a disclaimer. And this disclaimer is really for the benefit of our closed captioning that we have. So I have to read it. I apologize. I know all of you can read, but the information provided in Max by AccessLex events and other Max by AccessLex resources is being made available to assist you in developing your personal financial strategy and is not intended as investment, tax, or legal advice. You should consider whether the information is appropriate for your needs and where applicable, seek advice from an appropriate professional advisor. And I'd just like to add that both Jennifer DeSanza and I are accredited financial counselors. And most of our team is also accredited as financial counselors. So we are here to help you. And I'm here to talk to you first a little bit about who AccessLex is. And many of you may not know us because we really are not in the undergrad realm, right? We really work with law schools. And so we are a nonprofit organization committed to helping talented, purpose-driven students just like yourself find your path from an aspiring lawyer or professional to a fulfilled lawyer or professional. So we have in partnership with us 200 of the ABA nonprofit approved law schools, and most of the undergrad schools are part of our pre-law efforts. And so obviously you guys are part of that mission. And so our mission is really to focus on the affordability and the accessibility of a legal education. And so we really want to strengthen that. We want to really be transparent and to help students understand that if you do have a dream to go to law school, that there are services, there are resources for you to lean on to help understand and get you through that process. We have a great program called Max Pre-Law by AccessLex. And that is a whole curriculum set aside. It has different modules on different parts of this pre-law process. Everything from budgeting to paying for law school. How do you decide what law school? How many law schools should you apply to? What are the law schools and what do they focus on? If I'm interested in public service, there are over 200 law schools out there. What are the top public service law schools? What are the top criminal defense law schools, right? So there are a lot of services within Max Pre-Law, and we'll tell you how to set up an account. The account that you set up is free and it's confidential, and and again, no charge to you, but you can use all the services that are there. So we really hope that you will use Max Pre-Law to help you through your journey. So let's talk about what we will cover in today's workshop. To start off with, let's define application process, okay? And so when I talk about the application process, I'm referring to the financial aid process. I'm referring to how you're actually going to pay for it. This is not a seminar on how to complete your application for admission, okay? So we're going to really focus on the paying for law school portion, all right? Any questions on that? All right. So as part of that understanding of how to pay for law school, we're going to cover what are average law school costs that are out there, right? What is the application process like on a very high level, not a detailed level, okay, a very high level for you? What types of financial aid are available out there? Now, financial aid at the graduate level is different than undergrad. And every law school, although you will start out with the FAFSA, again, which is similar to what you did in undergrad, but you'll start out with completing that FAFSA, and then you should check the individual law school's financial aid page, because every school might have an additional form for you to fill out. So we're going to go over what types of aid are out there in the law school realm and answer some questions for you. Obviously, the vast majority of law students are going to be utilizing student loans as their primary means for paying for law school. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. The dollar amount limits are different when you get to grad school than in undergrad. And so those limits are different. Likewise, the interest rates vary slightly as well. So we're going to talk about that. So let's first talk about the largest expense while you're in law school will likely be tuition and fees. But we can't ignore the cost of being a law student, right? Because being a law student costs money. You have rent to pay, you have living expenses, you have to eat, you have to, if you're doing virtually, then you have to know where are you going to be? Are you physically going to be close to your law school? Are you physically going to be close to home? Right? So everyone is going to be a little unique and that's why we talk about average costs, because everybody has their own costs. Okay. And so that really will be part of your day-to-day living expenses. So let's look at these pre-law school costs. So these are costs even before you get to law school. It's what many of you are going through right now, right? So you've got the LSAT or GRE. And so put in the chat panel, are you looking at taking the LSAT or the GRE? Go ahead and put that. I'd like to see what the group is looking at. And then Jen, if you can let me know what the majority of people say, that would be terrific.
So far, it's all LSAT.
Great. Excellent. So you see here that there are estimates, that these are just estimates. You see this range, $202 to $205 for LSAT or GRE. And again, I want to emphasize that these pre-law school costs that you will be incurring can really vary. And they vary on your individual and personal circumstance that's unique to you. Some of you might be married and you have a family to consider. Others might be single, but maybe you have a lot of undergrad debt to get you to where you are today. So everybody's circumstance is a little different. And so with the LSAT and GRE exams, I want to make sure that you are aware that there are waivers. Okay. And so, but you have to ask for them, right? So LSAC, which is the firm that does the LSATs, right? They offer fee waivers for students with extreme financial need. So, but you have to go and apply for it. And so I'm of the mindset, always try, right? If you don't ask the question, the answer is always no. And so always go out and take a look at these fee waivers that are out there. Also, individual schools may also offer fee waivers for application processes, okay? So if you get an LSAC fee waiver, most likely by having that fee waiver, some of the law schools may waive their application fees. So again, ask the question. Again, even if you don't get that fee waiver for your LSAT exam, still ask the question of a school if they can give you a fee waiver, right? Each LSAC fee waiver will waive the following if you get one. It will waive 2 LSATs, 1 CAS registration, 6 CAS law school reports, a 1-year subscription to LSAC's official LSAT Prep Plus, and a score review for first-time test takers. So you get a lot, and I think it's really worth asking for that fee waiver. Jen, do you have any comments on that? Because Jennifer DeSanza, my moderator, worked at a law school, and I think we are both really passionate about students pursuing and looking at what kind of fee waivers could be offered. Go ahead, Jen.
The thing I want to add about LSAC fee waivers, and I've learned this over the last year, if you get denied the first time, it's always good to appeal it. I actually had a couple of people on the same webinar we were doing for a different group yesterday that they appealed it and got a waiver on it. So be persistent. I always like to say that when you go to law school, you're learning to be an advocate. So the first thing that you should do is learn to advocate for yourself. As Amy said, the worst thing that can happen is you get a no answer.
Excellent. Thank you, Jen. So that is, looking at these costs, if you don't take advantage of waivers here and there, they can cost you, right? They add up over time. And especially if you're applying to 4 or 5 law schools, it's definitely worth the ask. And so just be aware that these are just pre-law school costs. These are estimates so that you don't kind of wake up one day and said, oh my gosh, what have I gotten myself into, right? So if you look at this, that even like the prep courses that are out there could be 1,500, right? You need a CAS, which is the Credential Assembly Service, for each law school that you're applying to. And then once you get accepted to law school, they're going to ask for a seat deposit. Some law schools will have two different deadlines, 2 different amounts for seat deposits. And those are generally early June, end of May timeframe, where the seat deposit holds your space. If at that time, and that's why, let's say you're on a waiting list for a school, at that time, that's when schools start looking at their waiting list by how many seat deposits they've gotten in. Okay, so it's always good to constantly be checking, be in contact with the school admissions office to make sure you know where you're standing. Let's take a look at average law school costs. Now, again, I want to emphasize the word average. Okay, it doesn't mean that these are going to be your costs, and I will show you as we go through this example. So you'll see that we have said that average tuition and fees for public resident is about $28,000. For public non-resident, that's about $42,000. So you see there's a pretty big difference if you're a resident or if you're not a resident. Now, there are some law schools that might be located in one state that give reciprocal residency to a neighboring state. So you'll want to check that out to see what are they going to be charging you tuition, in state or out of state. Oops, my apologies there. Okay. And then, of course, you've got private law schools. All right. And you see that their average cost is about 50,000. So pretty big differential, right? Almost double between 28,000 and $50,000, right? On average. I just like to round numbers. Sometimes it's easier to keep track. Now comes almost another 50% of your overall costs, which are living and book expenses. And so at public schools, they take a look at the average living expenses about 21,000, and that's about across the board. Private schools give you a little bit more, 24,000. Again, that is average. And again, that can be, that is different from school to school. It depends. You might go into a rural area in which you will see average living and book expenses to only be 13,000 because their cost of living is cheaper, rent is cheaper, utilities, right? Whereas, and that could be, for instance, maybe in Louisiana, in Baton Rouge, it might be a little cheaper to go to law school than in New York City or in Los Angeles, right? Those are big, high cost cities. So just know that your cost of attendance is made up of tuition and fees and your living and miscellaneous. And so you see here, this is where, a lot of people may say, okay, Amy, there's not, so there's a slight differential in tuition and fees, and the average living costs are the same. But when you add those two together, take a look at the total. The total could be $48,000 or $73,000. Okay, that's over $20,000 for 1 year. And then you multiply it by 3. So it's a $60,000 differential between school A or school B potentially. So we bring this up. And why do I bring this up? Because as you're paying for law school, I think it's important that you understand where that data comes from. All right. And this data is that we derive is actually from the ABA, what we call 509 reports. And we actually have a tool. We have a tool called AccessLex. And AccessLex takes all that 509 data from law schools all around the country and it condenses it. So if you're looking for what a particular law school costs, sometimes it's hidden on their website. Sometimes it's really hard to figure out, oh my gosh, these are by credit. How many credits do I take in law school, right? So what the 509 reports do and AccessLex will do for you, it'll give you a complete cost of attendance. So you can look at that. Jen has dropped that link in the chat panel, and you'll be able to then actually compare the law schools that you're interested in. Okay, so that's what I talk about average law school costs. Now let's jump over to the average amount borrowed. Okay, you see here that the average law student grad borrows about $145,500. Okay, now when you get to grad school, interest begins accruing immediately on your unsubsidized loan and your Grad Plus loan. Those are going to be your 2 federal loans that you'll be eligible for. So interest starts from day one. Unlike when you're an undergrad, you had a subsidized loan. And the subsidized loan, the government pays the interest while you are in school. So just to be clear, when you go to grad school, your subsidized loans from undergrad will continue, the interest will continue to be subsidized. Okay, government will continue to pay the interest on those subsidized loans. If you have any unsub loans, which most, unless you're an independent student and there's severe need, but for the most part, your loans are subsidized, okay? When you get to the graduate level, they are unsubsidized loans, and you can get a maximum of $20,500. Okay, we encourage students to look at the unsubsidized loans first because the unsubsidized loans have lower fees and they have about a 1% lower interest rate. The other loan that you will have is a Grad Plus loan, which has a slightly higher interest rate and higher fees. Okay, So when I look at this average amount borrowed, it's 145,500. And we assume that you've taken out the maximum 20,500 for the unsub. So when we look at capitalized interest over 3 years, okay, you have about $23,500 worth of capitalized. What does that mean? That means $23,000 of interest has accrued on your student loans from law school, which means when you enter repayment, you don't owe just 100, you don't owe just 145,500. That interest gets capitalized, it gets added to your principal. And so your debt at the time you enter repayment when you finish law school will be closer to $169,000. Okay. I know it gets a little confusing, but this just kind of gives you the reality. A lot of students kind of go, oh my gosh. And remember, this is what the average person borrows. And by all means, does it mean if you borrow more that it's bad? No. It just means that your personal circumstance, maybe you did not get the scholarship you wanted, you don't have family to really help you. So you may borrow more. I mean, I think both Jennifer and I have counseled borrowers. It's not unusual for me to see some borrowers with 200,000 and above, right? Does that mean that they were wrong to go to law school? Absolutely not. It is your personal circumstance, and some people have to borrow more and some people don't, right? But we're here just to tell you that just be aware of how much you're going to borrow. Think about that in advance, and you can run our calculator. At AccessLex, we have a calculator that you can run that will project what your monthly payments will be, just so you are not surprised at the end. So if you borrowed this 169,000, let me call that, your monthly payment under a 10-year standard is going to be almost $2,000, right? $1,927. If you go an extended route, okay, and go over 25 years, you're looking at reducing that to about 1,100. But remember, it's going out 25 years and not 10 years. Now, within the student loan, federal student loan, there are also income-driven repayment plans. And so just know, I think what I really want to get across to you here is that there is a way for you to repay these loans. There are forgiveness programs that are out there. So if public interest is something that you really like, I don't want you to be afraid of going to law school and carrying some debt, right? Because there are forgiveness programs, and we would love to talk to you. In Max Pre-Law, you have a coaching ability that you can make an appointment with Jennifer DeSanza, my wonderful moderator, to talk about, hey, can you help me understand what my debt is? Here's my financial position. This is the law school I'm looking at. And we can help you run numbers so that you understand before going. And also we can help you compare and say, hey, Amy, I got into law school A and law school B, and I'm really torn. I don't know which one to go to. They're both great schools. And we can ask some questions and help you kind of narrow down your choices. At the end of the day, our jobs as coaches for you is not to tell you what to do, but to empower you to make the best decision for yourself. Okay. And yes, thank you, Jen. All of our pre-law services are free. So remember, I just showed you that chart of average cost, right? And cost of attendance. So here are the direct costs and here are your living expenses. So we've itemized them out so you have an idea of what living expenses will I have other than rent, right? A lot of students are a little taken back. Oh, there's transportation, there's health insurance. And a lot of schools will offer health insurance if you don't have it. But then again, if you have a cheaper version or if you can go on to your parents' health insurance plan, that's obviously good as well, right? Don't forget the transportation will include if you have a car payment and car insurance and parking. Okay, that's all lumped together. So you've got your direct costs and you've got your living costs. And again, every school will have this outlined for you. So now we talk about net cost. Okay, net cost to me is just what it means. You have your cost of attendance, and then let's subtract what kind of aid you might be able to get. When you apply for financial aid at law schools, they will award you merit scholarships based on academic performance, right? And there are also scholarships out there for law students. And I'm going to talk about that a little later on because AccessLex just debuted a brand new scholarship data bank that has over 800 scholarships for law school students only. And so we spent, I think over a year vetting every single scholarship and ensuring that they are a scholarship for law students. So we have our own data bank of other scholarships that will help reduce your net cost, right? So here's an example that a cost of attendance was $60,000. This individual got a $15,000 academic merit scholarship, and then they got a grant by the school. The school had a grant available for them. So now the out-of-pocket cost is about $40,000. And so what would you get first? You'd get that unsub loan. Remember I talked about the unsub loan being lower fees and lower interest, and the max being $20,500. And then the rest would be covered by your Grad Plus. Okay. And so you would get about 20,000 in the Grad Plus. Now, what gets subtracted from this, from your loan, is if you have savings, if you have a gift, if you get any outside scholarships. Okay, so this is where, when I talk about net costs, this 40,000 is after you have received your financial aid package. So once you apply to a law school, the second step is you get accepted, right? The third step is financial aid will give you what they call an award letter, very similar to the undergrad. Okay, you'll get your award letter, and that award letter will tell you how much they've given to you in loans, scholarships, and grants. So you really want to take a look at that to see truly how much you're going to have to borrow. The other important thing to look at when you're looking at paying for law school is this scholarship given by the school of 15,000 and the grant. You want to ask them, if it doesn't stipulate, is this renewable? And if it's renewable, what are the qualifications for it to be? Is it an auto renew for 3 years that regardless of your GPA or standing, that's what it is? Or do you have to maintain a certain GPA? Or is it just a one-time cost, right? And so some students, they assume that this is 3 years. And then in year 2, they're like, hey, what happened to my grant? And the school will say, oh, well, you didn't read that grant was only a 1-year grant, right? So that's why we ask for you to really get clarification on your financial aid award letter, if that is guaranteed for 3 years, 4 years, if you're going part-time, right? Or if it's auto renewable. That will have a huge impact on ultimately how much you borrow. And yes, as Jen put into the chat panel, I hope you guys have that chat panel open, which is a great tip. Make sure you understand all the parameters of any scholarship offered. So other financial resources for you to consider using to paying for law school are obviously your personal resources. If you're working during the summer, many of you guys are seniors and you might have the summer working, try to save as much as you can so you can offset some of your living costs, right? Put it in a savings account. Use that as your emergency fund. Okay, look for outside grants and scholarships. The school will give you what they have, but then you have to put some work into looking at outside scholarships. Of course, there's student loans. And although most 1L students, first year law students, will not be working in the first year law school, they really frown upon that because, going into your first semester of law school, it is a whole change of the way you learn, right? It's think of going up another step, right? You're climbing a ladder, you're going up another step. It's going to be a lot more reading, writing, a lot more time and effort spent academically. So many law schools actually, for 1Ls, frown upon you working. So just be prepared that you may not be working. If you are working, I surely would balance it out to make sure you've given yourself enough time to study. because once you start falling behind academically, especially on a graduate level, it's very hard to get caught up. But always look at these financial resources. And I would say the most underutilized and forgotten resource are outside grants and scholarships. People just, they think it's too much effort. And it used to be until AccessLex debuted our data bank, and now you can actually do a parameter search, right? You could say, I'm an incoming 1L student. I'm interested in this type of law. And we have a drop-down box. And I'm interested in scholarships between $500 and $5,000. Okay. And it will produce a list of parameters of scholarships that fit that need. And there'll be in there deadlines. And there are quite a few deadlines. I would encourage you to look at those now, because there are deadlines that are occurring on March 31st of this year and going into April and May. So if you're looking to apply to law school for the fall of 2021, I would really recommend you start searching for some of these outside scholarships. All right, so now we've hit very lightly on the types of financial aid, right? I talked a little bit about the student loan portion, which is, as a graduate student, you're eligible for an unsub and then the grad plus. And between those two, they will bridge 100% of your cost of attendance. Now, that cost of attendance is what the school has authorized. Your particular costs might be more based on your personal circumstance, especially if you have a family and if you have children and daycare expenses. Those are above and beyond what the school allocates. And so in some cases, you'll need to talk to financial aid about, is there any way to increase that cost of attendance? There are some special circumstances where they can, but I had this horror story from a student this past year. She was making about $100,000 a year. And she thought, when they said cost of attendance, that if she went to law school, she could borrow $100,000 a year in loans. And she was really surprised when she couldn't. And it put her family in a very desperate situation, because they were counting on that 100,000. And when she was only getting 20,000 for her living costs, that became a real problem. So I want to make sure that you guys understand, exactly the cost of attendance and how that impacts what you end up borrowing. So you have your student loans, the unsub and the grad plus. You have grants and scholarships, both endowed scholarships and outside scholarships. So look at both areas, okay? And then you have employment. So there are times during break, winter break or spring break or summers, or weekends, that maybe you can get a part-time job. Some schools also participate in federal work study. All right, so ask the question, see if they do. All right, and I am all about free money. I'm an econ major, and I have to tell you, there's nothing better than free money. And so I look a lot towards need-based and merit-based aid. I look for outside scholarships and grants that are available out there. I think you would be surprised how many scholarships actually go unfunded because people just don't even think to apply. Okay. And in my mind, no scholarship is too small. I don't care if a scholarship is $250 or if it's $500. If you get enough of them, right? If you got 10 of them, that's $5,000. So think about applying. Don't worry about the amount up front, but you should keep track of it, right? But really kind of keep that at the forefront of your mind, that there are scholarships out there for you. The federal loans, of course, I'm a big proponent on. They have a lot of benefits. Private loans, especially now that you're at the grad level, I would hope that you would minimize your private loans, because the private loans don't give you the same type of protections that federal loans have. So federal loans, there are lots of different repayment programs to go under. I think many of you are experiencing right now, because of COVID, there's zero interest and zero payments are required. So those students that were making student loan payments up until March of 2020, their payments got suspended. But people that had private loans, their payments were not suspended. So that's what I mean when I talk about federal loans having some protection, okay? And private loans, pardon? Okay. Anyway, so any questions on the types of financial aid for you to get? Anybody have any questions out there? Jen, do you see any questions out there?
Not yet. They might
Oh.
be saving it for the end.
Okay, so there are, remember I talked about our data bank? This is the wonderful URL for the data bank. Okay, so again, 800 vetted scholarships. We have vetted these already. We have looked at their due dates, their deadlines, and what they require. And there are links there that you can continue to drill down and look specifically at what is required for them. Okay, so really look at that. We really, we've gotten lots of great comments back in the last week since we've launched this. So again, it's accesslex.org/databank. And I really have to emphasize again, this is free. The one thing that we don't believe in is for prospective law students to be paying for things, right? And so if there's a scholarship pool out there that you're interested in, but they tell you you need to pay, I would recommend that you contact a Max coach, pre-law coach, and say, hey, I'm thinking about this. What do you think? But I think that there are enough free services out there for you that you should not have to pay for scholarship searches. Okay. And I think your financial aid people and your pre-law advisors would also agree that they have a lot of resources out there without paying. So let's talk about the financial aid process, because unlike undergrad, graduate financial aid application process, time becomes critical, right? You want to be the first in to get the free money, right? Because many schools have an allocation, and once all the free money is gone, they don't have it. So you want to start early. So if you are looking for the fall of getting into law school, that's August 2021, you should have already completed the FAFSA for next year. So please, if you haven't done so, complete that. Even if you don't know what schools you're going to right away, complete that FAFSA. Okay, look at the law schools you're looking at going to and make sure you understand the deadlines for applying for financial aid at those schools. Look at the deadlines for scholarships and grants. Okay, and if those of you who are interested in the fall of starting law school, I would suspect that some of you might have already even gotten acceptance letters. And if you have acceptance letters, some of you may also have your financial aid offer letter. So that's kind of the timeline to expect, right? You'll apply for law school, you'll get an acceptance. If you get accepted, then following up will be a financial aid award letter. Following the financial aid award letter, you'll see the deadline for seat deposits. Okay, any questions on that? Excellent. So Jen, just interrupt me if there are questions. So when you get multiple financial, hopefully you'll get multiple acceptance letters and multiple financial aid letters. A good thing to do is compare them, right? Because you're going to compare them on cost, on your net cost. In other words, how much financial aid are they giving? How much free money are they giving to you, right? And remember, it's important, is that free money automatic for 3 years? Then calculate what their cost of living allocation is for you. Take a look at that, okay? Can you live, do you think you can live off that cost of living? And calculate what your total out-of-pocket costs will be. All right? And that's really important because you may have a private school that has a large endowment, that has a lot of grant money or scholarship money, versus a state school that doesn't have anything. So even though the cost, right, you might think, oh, I need to go to my state school because Amy showed me that slide of average cost and it was $27,000 for tuition. The private school was close to 50,000, right? But what happens if that private school gave you a full tuition scholarship, right? All of a sudden, that private school becomes more affordable than the state school. So that's what we mean by really taking a look at the offer letters and making sure you compare them. Here's a quick Excel chart. I'm a big Excel guru. I know Jen is as well. And sometimes it's easier if you're applying, especially to 3 or 4 law schools and you're getting these award letters and you've been accepted, is to put them side by side, right? And really understand where they are. And I think what's really important is this other consideration, right? Is really thinking about, and this could have a really big start. We have other webinars that talk about choosing a law school. You know, that's a whole different topic that we can talk about forever. But you want to take a look at, is this a law school you really want to go to, right? When you're looking at cost, because it's not just about cost. It's finding the right fit for yourself. And that's in our, that's in a different workshop that we have called Choosing a Law School. Scholarship reconsiderations, okay? We really want to make sure that you understand this and make sure that you are comfortable with the scholarship reconsideration process, right? You want to make sure that you review the website and the admissions information, cost of living, really look at what you have to do to keep the scholarship. Okay. If you see a scholarship and you apply and you haven't heard, there's nothing wrong with following up on it and asking, did you receive my application materials? When will you be making your scholarship determination? Okay. So you want to really think about that. Stay up to date on that. I know when my daughter went to law school, she had a binder, and in that binder, she kept track of every scholarship she applied to. It was like a title sheet, right? Where she said the scholarship name, the amount, and the deadline. Her information was attached to the back of it, and then the final outcome, whether somebody else won the scholarship or she won the scholarship. So you might want to think about that. When we talk about understanding student loans, I think I've probably exhausted that already for many of you, but I just want to give you just this chart for you to think about, all right? That there's the federal direct unsub, there's the federal grad plus that will bridge everything else for you. And of course, there are private loans. I do have many times business majors who say, but Amy, interest rates are so low right now, and I can get a private loan at a fixed interest rate for 5% with no fees. What do you think about that? And I say, think about look at the fine print to make sure that is what it is. If you can truly get 5%, take a look at the repayment terms to make sure they benefit you. Okay. And also make sure that that interest rate is truly fixed. And if it's a private loan, it's probably going to be depending on credit. So just because they offer a 5% loan, that's going to be with somebody with a very strong credit score and good credit. Many times students, because of your age, you just don't have that strong credit right now. And so even though they say interest rates as low as 5% fixed, when you apply, your actual interest rate might be higher. So just kind of keep that in mind and really kind of review all of your options. And again, feel free to talk to one of us as your Max Pre-Law coach for any questions that you might have. Remember, applying for your student loan, unsub, and grad plus is really no different than what you've done in the undergrad. The only difference is the grad plus loan is going to look for a negative credit check. So there'll be an extra step that you have to do there. And hopefully many of you will pass the negative credit check. If you do not get approved for the grad plus, there are still things you can do. And so I would recommend, I'm not going to go into all the different options you have, but just because you got denied a grad plus, don't give up. Give us a call your Max Pre-Law coach. talk to your financial aid office of that law school. They'll give you some options that you can use an endorser to help you. An endorser is very similar to cosigner, but not the same as a cosigner on a private loan. So there are some very distinct differences. We have this great booklet for you for you to look at. It's called Financing Your Legal Education. And it has about everything I've covered today is in this booklet. So you can download the booklet. If you went into your Max Pre-Law, create that Max Pre-Law account, you'll be able to see that pretty quickly on there, or go onto our website. But we really, and Jen just put the booklet direct link there for you as well. So take a look at that. I mentioned our calculator. Here's the URL for our calculator, accesslex.org/calculator. This will help project for you. And what we have is, remember that 509 report I mentioned that all law schools complete with their cost of attendance? We have actually taken that cost of attendance and uploaded it into our calculator. So at the very beginning of the calculator page, it will ask you, are you an aspiring student, or are you a current student, or are you a graduate? And if you say you're an aspiring student, it'll ask for the law school. And if you click the law school that you want, we will pre-fill what the cost of attendance is per the 509 reports. And then you'll be able to estimate how much you need to borrow at that particular school. So even before you get your financial aid award letter, you can get a rough idea on our calculator, which is a really good tool to really get an idea of how much you think you're going to have to borrow. But again, please wait for your award letter, because that could make a huge difference. And award letters can vary greatly out there for you. So always look for that. Again, Max Pre-Law. I can't emphasize it enough. You see this from a graduate. It is a great resource. We spent a lot of time. You can find almost everything you want there. And what you can't find, you click a button for Max Pre-Law Coaching, and you can always ask the question and you'll get a response from us, okay? Or schedule a coaching call. Now, to get your Max Pre-Law account, you might say, Amy, how do I do that? You first register. Again, it is free. It is confidential. So you'll look at accesslex.org/max-prelaw. Okay, again, accesslex.org/max-prelaw. We'll just ask for some really high-level information. We're looking at your name. You'll create a password, an email address, and that's about it on there. Again, I really have to talk about Max Pre-Law coaching. I know we get flooded with calls this time of year with students just trying to understand. There might be something in your award letter that you don't quite understand, and you don't even know how to talk to the financial aid office about it. So you can give our coaches a call and say, hey, I'm not sure. Is this a grant? Is it a scholarship? Is it a loan? Okay, sometimes schools may have low interest rate loans available for you to take out. So we'll help you navigate that language. We've always talked that financial aid and law school, we have our own languages, right? And student loans have their own language, right? There's a whole kind of syllabus of acronyms that we use. So don't be afraid to ask if you don't understand something. We want you to make sure you understand exactly what type of financial aid you're getting or what type of loans you're signing up for, so that it is completely transparent and you are prepared for going to law school and understand at the end what those monthly payments look like. Because the last thing we want you to be is surprised at the end of 3 years, right? Because you put a lot of hard work into that. So on behalf of Jen DeSanza and all of your financial aid people and pre-law folks at your school, I want to thank you for spending the last hour with me. And we're going to open up to questions.
Thank you both, Ms. Gordon and Ms. DeSanza, so much for all of that very beneficial information. I had the chance just to look at some of the links you posted, and my goodness, the scholarship database especially, It's a game changer. So thank you so much for all the work you put into cultivating these resources for pre-law students. I think if anyone has any questions, feel free to please put those in the chat. I did have kind of one question to start us off. You talked about, looking heavily into the scholarships that are offered to you in an award letter from your school. Um, do you have any advice on maybe what a student should consider if the only scholarship they get is a conditional scholarship?
So, how I look at a conditional scholarship is to make sure you understand the what if, right? What if I can't get it in year two? What does that do to my overall situation? Um, is it a hurdle that is easily achievable? For instance, is it conditioned upon a 2.0 GPA? In which in law school, I can tell you if you're going below a 2.0 GPA, you've got a long way to catch up to even kind of finish law school past the bar, right? Because at the end, it's not just you could get your JD, but many people, if you're aspiring to practice law, then you'll need to pass the bar. And keep in mind that not all JDs want to pass the bar, right? There are lots of careers out there that are JD advantage. And actually, Jennifer DeSanza is a great coach in that, in understanding kind of which way you can go, right? That not passing the bar is not the end of the world for somebody that has gone to law school. And, I can tell you firsthand, for the last 3 nonprofits I've worked for, our CEOs have all been attorneys. They've all been JDs. Not all have passed the bar, but they've been JDs. So that would be my advice is, just the what if and understanding the parameter and the what if you have to fill it with a student loan, what does that do to your monthly payment? If it's only a $2,500 scholarship at the end, right? If you got it for year 1, year 2 and 3, it's only $5,000 more. So the difference of borrowing 145,000 or 150,000, is that going to make or break you financially? Most cases would be a no. But if it's a $30,000, $25,000 conditional scholarship, that might have a different ramification. Jen, do you have any comments on that?
The conditional thing that Sharon, you asked about is important because when Amy said a 2.0, that is probably probationary. You'll have to look at how it's worded. So you might get kicked out of school if you fall below a certain thing. So a lot of conditional scholarships will say in good standing, but once you fall below good standing, you're not in school anymore, or you might be probationary, and that would be it. So I think what Amy hinted at, but didn't really say, is that you may think a 2.5 or a 3.0 might be easy. You might be a 4.0 student, but you also have to remember law schools have curves. So if you're like, oh, it only has a 2.5 standard for that conditional, you have to look at it in with respect of what the curve is at that school, because it's not a straight grade. So that we could have a whole additional conversation on curves, law school curves. And I'm sure you all have conversations about that or are all aware of that, but just put that in context. A 2.5 is not necessarily a 2.5, or a 3.0 is not necessarily a 3.0.
Excellent. And Sharon, you have a great question in the chat panel. The advice on negotiating with schools for more aid. I am all about asking the question, right? If you have a school and you're trying to decide between two, you can pit them against each other and say, call school A and said, I'd love to come to you, but school B gave me this much. Can you reconsider my financial aid and see if there's anything else? I think the two things to be very cognizant of when you're appealing your financial aid package is A, to be respectful, okay, and to be humble. Because the last thing somebody wants to do is talk to a student who's demanding and saying, well, if you don't give me this, I'll go someplace else. I will tell you, on somebody's not so good day, they might tell you, great, go someplace else, right? Which is not the answer you want. So be humble, be respectful, and ask, right? And ask, what else can I do? Right? What else can I do? What scholarships do you recommend I go out for? Do you have work study that I can maybe do? Some federal work study money? Can you give me some suggestions, because I'd really like to come to your school and I'm just falling a little short. But always keep that lines of communication, not just open with financial aid, but even admissions. Because remember, admissions is trying to fill that spot. They think you are a good fit for that spot. So sometimes admissions will advocate, right? You're advocating for yourself to admissions. Admissions will advocate for you to financial aid. And between you and admissions, financial aid may reconsider a little bit more aid for you.
I would just also add on that too, when a law school says, one of the things we talk about in applying for law school is it's a rolling admission cycle. So the sooner you apply, the more money is available and the more spaces that are available. So if you go back to for a reconsideration, they may not be able to tell you because they're waiting for other people to either accept or deny. They have a limited pool of funds. So they may say, I won't know until the first deposit date or something like that. And understanding that cycle. And again, that's something we can talk to you in the coaching arena for, just kind of coaching you about like, okay, the school said this, what's the next step? So understanding the cycle and how they may really want to give you money, but you came later in the cycle, or more money, but you came later in the cycle. And they're still waiting for those earlier people to say yes or no to. So understanding that in the context of the whole scholarship cycle.
Excellent. Thank you, Jen. So you see another question, Jen. Do you want to read that out loud for us?
Sure. Could you discuss further about forgiveness programs and how they work? I don't know, Amy, if you want me to talk about this.
Go ahead. That's fine.
All right. So there are various forgiveness programs. There's a government program. There's public service loan forgiveness that is handled through the government for public interest jobs. But many schools, as Amy said, might have what's called loan repayment assistance programs, where they help you pay your loans. And the criteria for school-based loan repayment assistance programs vary from school to school. Some have them, some don't. Some are very generous. I was working with a student probably last week, I think, who was applying to a school that literally the school would, if you made under $70,000, they paid your payment for the 10 years until you qualified for public service loan forgiveness. So this might be, that is another thing to consider when you're looking at schools. If you're planning a career in public service, but you might not got the scholarship on the front end, having a generous loan repayment assistance program might make up the difference. So there are so many factors to take into consideration. So we have a whole program on public service loan forgiveness, the government program. I'll put a link in the chat panel that goes into more detail on that program, but there's also those LRAPs, as they're called, loan repayment assistance programs.
And I think the other, although it's really not a forgiveness per se, right? That many employers now, especially law firms, are providing some assistance. They may not pay your full student loan payment, but they will contribute a certain amount each year that you are employed. So don't underestimate that. I think you will see right now there is a lot being spotlighted on student loan indebtedness right now with President Biden's administration, right? You see everything from, a one-time $10,000 forgiveness across the board. We're still a long ways from trying to get that from concept to passage. Just so you know, I would not count on that necessarily. But there are, forgiveness comes in different sources, and you want to take a look at, is forgiveness true forgiveness? Is the forgiveness a taxable event? In other words, well, I have to pay taxes on it. And so there's a lot to consider. So when you say, can we talk about forgiveness programs, we have to really kind of dissect them out for you. Public service loan forgiveness currently does not have any tax implications. Okay,
And
great question. I'm sorry, Jen, did I cut you off?
No, I was just gonna go more on that employer benefit. We're seeing that is another thing when you're at the tail end and you're negotiating employment, something to consider. Right now, the government has extended the tax free benefit to employers and students or graduates. So if your employer gives you up to $5,250, it's tax free to them and it's tax free to you as part of loan repayment. So that has been part of the COVID relief, that they've extended these tax relief efforts for that kind of support. And these are just things to be aware of when you go to school, when you graduate, and always be aware. But you know what? AccessLex is always going to be there. And so when you're in law school, we have a Max program that is completely free. You can talk to us through coaching there. So we will be there to support you through your journey.
Excellent. I think it's a great thing. And also remember, you know, we realize that you're just applying to law school, right? And so 3 years from now, let's hope COVID is, you know, in our rear view mirror, right? But being in the federal program, this is another example when I talk about understanding and having the protection of a federal program. There are lots of things going on, forgiveness programs and things like that. They don't apply to the private loans. The LRAP programs that Jennifer DeSanza mentioned, they apply to federal loans. Many of them do not apply to private loans. So please choose very wisely and carefully. Thank you very much, guys. Great questions.
And you've gone above and beyond. So I think that's a good segue to say thank you to both of you for the time you've spent. And I want to encourage my students, just go to the website and start playing around with it. And especially one of the last things that Amy and Jennifer are saying is that it doesn't stop when you get to law school, that they'll be available for you to talk about your loans and loan forgiveness and all of the other questions that come up once you get there. But I think you can understand now why I said, no, we need to get our folks from AccessLex to come and talk about this topic, because these truly are the subject matter experts. And the wonderful thing about it is you can make an appointment and talk to them about your personal questions. So remember that when the time comes.
I do want to just give a plug for those of you who are not graduating and applying for the fall. To remind you, I put it in the chat panel at the beginning. We have choosing a law school, we have applying to law school, and then once you get to law school, building your budget. That's all part of the pre-law thing. We're not doing it here, but we have national webinars throughout the months, so you can attend those.
Great. Thank you, Jen.
Yeah, I'll make sure too that that I get to Sharon and Sabrina and our folks at JMPLS the dates and links to your different seminars.
Great. Thank you very much, Barbara. And
Okay,
thank you,
friends.
everybody.
Yeah, good to see you all.
Bye-bye, guys.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Bye, Sharon.